Good afternoon, everyone. I'd love to introduce you to Dr. Bob Dozor, who's a longtime friend and also faculty member at Dharma College. And today we're going to ask a few questions of Bob so that students can get to know him a little bit more. My first question to you, Bob, is welcome. What brought you to Dharma College?
So, as you know, I met your dad 53 years ago.
Wow.
I mean, I knew you when you were a kid.
Uh-oh.
Um,
I don't think I was quite born yet, 1969.
no,
So,
no, I met him about the first of the year in 1972.
okay. Okay. So that does place us a little bit in context.
Yeah.
So,
So, in terms of Dharma College, it's just a natural extension. I've been involved to greater or lesser degree ever since, and it just seemed completely natural. It wasn't like there was a decision point or anything. It just kind of was organic.
well, that brings me to my next question, which is, what do you think, what is what do you hope your students will take away from your classes? Because you are teaching a class this term on keys of knowledge, but just in general, what would you like your students to take away from taking a class with you?
Um, Practice, more orientation to practice. And I have to say it that way because I'm very given to theoretical conceptualizing and all that stuff. Um, but it's all in the service of, it'll be successful if people practice more and just find motivation, inspiration, and maybe also some orientation toward making the practices useful.
Right. So very much focus on practice. Can you say anything about your class that you're going to be teaching, Keys of Knowledge? Just a little, maybe a little plug-in for the class.
So Keys of Knowledge is like a number of Rinpoche's books, but since I've really immersed myself in it this last year, really, um, is I'd like to say intensely concentrated. It's a relatively small book compared to some, and yet nothing is missing. And so it's very high test, premium grade, very, very, very rich. Um, and because of that, it's easy to just, if you just read it too fast, you don't get it.
Mhm.
Um, but it's all there. When I say all, I mean, for me, um, everything that's in the Lotus Trilogy, which is probably 10 times more words, is in Keys of Knowledge. So yeah, it's really the highest teachings that I've ever encountered. He's not holding back anymore. Maybe he
Mhm.
never was. I just didn't get it before.
Mhm. Well, that's something to look forward to for students who want to take a more practice-oriented class, but maybe go into a deeper exploration of some of the very, very meaningful and rich teachings that Rinpoche has to offer. It is a 300 level course, so it is for more advanced students in a way, someone who's taken a year of revelations of mind or gesture of great love or time, space, and knowledge. So um, do look out for that class, which is being offered this fall. Now, a question for you that I'm really curious about for all faculty, because all of you are voluntarily stepping into the plate of being a faculty member here. You do this really out of your love for the teachings, but why do you choose to teach here, and what drives your passion for education at Dharma College?
So I would say in 2018, I took the Lotus Trilogy retreat at Ratnaling, and the light bulbs went off, certain things went into alignment. It changed me. and inspired me. And and why I'm pointing directly to that, I mean, that directly led into Dharma College because Lotus Trilogy is a Dharma College text. And obviously there was decades before of other things, but it was a qualitative, transformational aha of experience and highly motivating to keep to teach. And then the teaching is the practice. It just amplifies my practice tenfold because I don't know, it just does. I mean, I could try to make up reasons for it, but I think it just did. That's the testimony, really.
It's so true. Can you share a little bit about your background prior to Dharma College? I know you're a medical doctor, but could you share a little bit so that people know the kind of context of your background?
Sure. Well, I think one thing that's worth saying is as an undergraduate, I studied the history and philosophy of science, and I started studying Buddhism. So, you know, it goes back to when I was 18 or 17, really young. After I met Rinpoche, my background was I lived and worked at Odeon and did construction work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I thought practice was construction work. And it was practice, but it was at a very physical, embodied level. And it took me a long time to appreciate, I thought I was being, shunted away from the tantras and, sitting and meditating and all this stuff because we worked our butts off, as you know. Um, but that teaches that it was a great teaching and it was embodying Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate it now. I didn't as much at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm beginning to have the opportunity to sort of understand or be exposed to what might be called the higher teachings. They're not really higher, they're just more maybe appropriate for old, broken down guys like me. But, so there's more sitting and more contemplation and a lot more reading. Um, and there's a lot of practice. And as I said, I feel incredibly grateful for the gifts of the way it's turned out in the last, well, since that Lotus Trilogy retreat. But still, looking back on it, it really started with getting my hands dirty at Odeon. And then what else in the background? After that, I went to medical school and my practice and never stopped being involved, but medical school and then medical practice was very time time intensive. But I was still going to retreats and various things and staying in touch. And then when I retired, and then when there was the Tubbs fire, it was the comment, which actually I retired shortly after the Tubbs fire, maybe a year or so after that. So the Tubbs fire, which, is a wildfire in Northern California, which destroyed my house and blah, 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 was, and I have to, I just want to mention to you and remind you of how incredibly kind you personally were to me at Ratnaling when I was in, retreat, living there after the fire. Um, but basically, it was obviously a life-changing event, and then followed shortly thereafter with the Lotus Trilogy work. Things changed,
Mm-hmm.
accelerated, elevated,
Mm-hmm.
grew. I don't know what the right words are.
Mm-hmm. Intensified. I
Intensified for
do
sure.
remember that day, Bob. From my perspective, I couldn't, I just, it was so impressive to see a person who was holding it together after losing everything, your house, all of your possessions, and maintaining that balance and a smile on your face and what felt to me like, oh, these are just material possessions. And I just thought, wow, you've had your whole life in front of you just blow up with a fire. And your reaction and response pretty much right after it seemed like it was very much in in that period. It wasn't like weeks later, so
No, it
you
was just a few
have
days. It was just a
a
few days.
prepared response. It was like pretty a raw response.
Well, they really are just possessions. And, I used to joke around that time, that it was better to have good insurance than good friends, which is totally not true. It's better to have good friends. But having good insurance helps. So I went on a I got the possessions back.
That's yeah. Well, that's good that you had good insurance, but your reaction, you can't really fake that. And your response was,
I
um,
wasn't that worried. I just
yeah,
wasn't, I
yeah,
just
yeah,
wasn't. I
yeah.
felt, first of all, very surrounded by the community and embraced by the community. I knew, there was like no way it wasn't going to work out one way or the other.
Well,
So,
that to me felt very much like embodied Dharma, like how someone is able to respond to a crisis situation and be able to handle balance and not, just completely dissolve into chaos or confusion or stress. But you were very impressive. So
I have a story about this, like right around that time. I mean, I'm sure within hours or a day or two of when we talked up at Ratnaling, my wife Ellen and I had this conversation like, you know, we're fine. Nobody's hurt. Um, we do have good insurance. We should just sit and be cool and not do anything, just relax. No need to make any decisions, just process. And I said, yes, dear. And then the next thing I did was call an insurance agent. I mean, excuse me, a real estate agent, and looked at my new house 2 days after the fire.
wow.
And then had it actually a contract to buy it 6 days after the fire, or maybe five. It was on Saturday. The fire was, we left our house at midnight between Sunday and Monday, and by Saturday we had a deal to buy this place.
Amazing. Well, you didn't waste time.
No wasting time.
That brings me to my next series of questions, which really has to do more about your personal, just to get a sense of what do you like to do outside of teaching? And what are some of your hobbies?
Well, we already talked about cooking, and I've been gardening to grow vegetables for my cooking, but my main hobbies per se would be guitar playing. You've heard that. You,
I
you've
have.
witnessed that. And I'm also a ham radio operator.
What's that?
Ham radio,
Yeah.
amateur radio. Um, Basically, I have a receiving and transmitting station in my garage, and I can talk all over the world on my radio.
Wow, that's pretty
But the
cool.
main the main thing I do with it, and it's why I got back into doing it, because I got licensed as a ham radio operator in 1962. So I was a kid, young kid. And then, pretty much dropped it during my career. But I got back into it to do emergency communication work. And I was recruited after the fire. Someone knew I had been a ham radio operator. And it turns out that we've actually been part of a very amazing thing in Sonoma County of neighborhood communications using walkie-talkies. So the people, even without ham licenses, because the cell phones go down and the internet and the landlines, they all go down. So these walkie-talkies stay up, and we
Hmm.
have repeaters that are much more hardened than cell towers are,
Hmm.
and we can communicate after an emergency. And there's been tremendous buy-in by the County of Sonoma, particularly the Department of Public Infrastructure, as well as the Department of Emergency Management. So that's sort of my other gig is emergency communications. I'm the assistant chief radio officer for the North Bay Communication Cooperative.
Wow, that's a big title, but
I
a
know we
very
just
important.
rebranded ourselves. Just we just we just did.
But it's very important. Sounds like it's a very important role to play, especially in times of emergencies where things
And
are,
in more rural areas,
yeah, in rural areas. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. My last question to you is, what's your favorite way to unwind after a long day?
Like I said, I go into this serious cooking mode that is so I mean, seriously, like taking parsley and pulling all the leaves off the stem so you can have really just um, getting into making very good cooking with a lot of hands-on. It's very meditative. Just takes me out of any worries. Just focus on on it and
Amazing.
cook. So cooking. And I've kind of gotten, I'm not 100% vegan, but that's mainly where my new dishes are coming from is completely plant-based vegan. Like lately, the biggest miracle I was just flabbergasted with how fabulous this was. Do you know what aquafaba is?
Have no idea. Please
So
share.
if you take a can of garbanzo beans,
Okay.
the water that you take the water off, well,
Mhm.
that aquafaba you is like egg. It's like egg. Anyway, you take some aquafaba, maybe some mustard, a little bit of black salt because that gives it that egg taste, and either with an immersion blender or a Cuisinart, and start drizzling in oil. And honest to God, in 30 seconds, you've got mayo. You got vegan mayonnaise.
Amazing. I
It
love
really is
vegan.
amazing.
I
It's like
love the veganized mayonnaise, but it's pretty expensive when you go to
it
Whole
is. It
Foods.
is expensive, and this is
Yeah,
it's just otherwise you throw the water away from the garbanzo beans.
right. What a great tip,
So
Bob.
because of that, I've had to start finding ways to eat garbanzos, which is totally fine. And there's a lot of ways to use garbanzos. Anyway, I digress.
Oh my gosh. I think I've had my lunch, but I know who to stop by and visit, knock on your door for lunch or dinner. It sounds wonderful. Well, Bob, thank you for your time. Thank you for being a great faculty teacher at Dharma College. We're just thrilled to have you here. And any student who gets a chance to sit in, work with Bob, he's an amazing teacher. And his life is a testimony to that because he's been deep into practice for 50 plus years. And today was a chance to get to know him a little bit. If you'd like to know more about him, we're going to have a chance to leave an email address too, so you can always write to him directly if you have a question about the class. Thank you so much, Bob, for your time today. And I
Thank
hope
you,
you
Anmo.
can join Bob's class.
It
Thank
was fun.
you. Bye bye. See you.
Ciao.